All right, welcome everybody. So this presentation is Advancing Watershed Health. This is Salt Lake County's 2025 Integrated Watershed Plan. We've tasked SWCA with helping us put it together, and they, along with our watershed section manager, are going to help present this. So we have Lily Wetterlin, Arianna Mason, both from SWCA, and then Robert Thompson, I guess. Robert Thompson from Salt Lake County Watershed. Take it away, folks.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We're here to present about our updated integrated watershed plan. This is a plan that we try to update every so often. It's usually a need-based process. This time I think it happens to be a time-based process, but the process has changed over the years. So we've been doing this for a long time. That first plan over here, that's a 1978 plan. So there's a little bit of history behind this. Back in 1978, this plan was trying to do what stormwater, drinking water, all of the different sections of the Clean Water Act now do today. We were trying to accomplish in an area-wide water quality management plan. And even though we attempted it, it wasn't the most successful. There's too much going on there. So different sections of the Clean Water Act have been updated. We no longer do everything that's in here. We actually leave a lot of that to other planning processes. So our 2009 plan updated the process, but still incorporated Clean Water Act Section 208 planning. Again, a bit of a relic. So we're trying to update our planning process just to be what the EPA suggests that we do today. So today, the common practice is an EPA 9-element plan. So this right here, even though we still call it the Integrated Watershed Plan, this is our updated version of the plan, and it does take away a lot of the elements that were originally there, but oftentimes for good reason they've been taken out. So just to, 10,000 foot perspective, we are concerned about our watershed. So our watershed obviously encompasses everything in this diagram. I'm sure everyone in here has seen a diagram like this before, but basically we're concerned about land use, we're concerned about water, we're concerned about how they interact. It all comes together in our watershed. So when we are talking about watersheds, the elements that we're super concerned with, we're concerned about water supply. We're concerned about environmental protection, flood control, biodiversity and habitat, recreational opportunities, climate resilience, public health, and natural beauty. So whenever we engage in a restoration project, or if we're doing a plan like this, we're going to try to check all of these boxes. They're the ones that we're really focused on. We've taken a lot of the elements from the 208 planning out. So where we're set. This is the Great Salt Lake Watershed. You can see where it fits into the state of Utah, and it's part of the Lower Jordan River Basin. It's a close but not perfect match to the entirety of the Lower Jordan Basin. There's this little section of the Jordan River that is left out of our planning process. Unfortunately, we are Salt Lake County. We can't do a plan for other counties, but it's mostly a contiguous plan for the Lower Jordan Basin. Now, in the Lower Jordan Basin, we've separated into 3 different segments because they have such vastly different needs and they are very different subwatersheds. So one of the subwatersheds that we focused on in this plan is a northeastern region. So this region encompasses Parley's Creek, Emigration Creek, City Creek, Red Butte, all of those northeastern streams in the county. We have a Tri-Canyons area, and that encompasses Mill Creek, Big and Little Cottonwood. And then over here, we've called this the Southwest, even though it does encompass part of the Northwest. But there really aren't any perennial streams in the Northwest. It's a fairly dry part of the valley, and the ones that are there, they're mostly human-dug canals. So it's a slightly different beast, but it follows some of the same patterns as the Southwest creeks do. So if you look at it from the elements we're trying to incorporate for all of those different sectors, habitat, water quality, hydrology, and then social and recreational services are of paramount importance. Now, social and recreational services are a little bit harder to measure and they're a little bit harder to provide. Habitat, we have tools to increase habitat. We have tools to measure and to try to improve water quality. And hydrology, same thing. We have tools to measure it, but social and recreational services, it's a little esoteric that way. So with our integrated planning elements, we looked at a number of different things. And this, we're constantly doing this. The evaluation and implementation activities, we're always looking at what we're doing and whether they're working or not. So every time we engage in a restoration project or every time we engage in a plan, we always try to figure out, is this working, is it not? There's always a monitoring component to that. So we're trying to make ourselves better as time goes by. Public education and outreach, we figured out this is one of the most important parts of any given plan or any given restoration process. The public education and outreach is difficult, but symposiums like this are where we've decided to stake our money and stake our claim and try to do the public education that needs to be done. And what's great about symposiums like this is all of you people who are way smarter than I am are presenting the information, and subject matter experts are sharing their best practices. We come here and we hear from people like Nalini this morning, and it really kind of opens your eyes as to the possibilities of what could be done. Policy guidelines is an area that we're starting to get more into. We've understood that planning and zoning processes, ordinance updates, although they're not necessarily any of our backgrounds or most of not our backgrounds, it's an area that we need to insert ourselves because our backgrounds have much relevance to our decisions regarding policy in the form of ordinance updates, zoning, planning decisions like that. Stakeholder coordination, involving a large number of folks in the planning process is really important. So in this plan, we've reached out to an amazing number that we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's been a lot of stakeholder coordination specifically for each one of those sub-watershed groups. We've also tried to incorporate monitoring into each one of our restoration strategies and to our water quality, water quantity data collection. We always want to make sure we're doing it the best we can and improve in the ways that we find possible. Based on all of this stuff, we try to amend our plan and update as necessary. Usually that's going to be a timing process. So in the 9-element EPA plans, they don't want to give non-point source funding to a plan that's 25 years old. So we have to make sure that our plan stays relevant, and we've decided that 10 years is kind of the longest we can go without updating a plan and keeping relevance, because in this valley, 10 years is a lifetime. So much has changed in the last 10 years. It's hard to go back. It's hard to think back beyond COVID, let's face it. But once we think back 10 years, that's a lot longer than COVID. So the implementation recommendations for the next planning cycle, that's where we actually start with where we ended over here. Evaluation leads to implementation. Now, with other management plans and other plans that are out there, this slide could have been really complicated. We focused on the management plans that are still relevant and still getting non-point source funding. So the Jordan River Comprehensive Management Plan, Blueprint Jordan River, that's really the guiding principle for one of our biggest partners. Salt Lake City Public Utilities Watershed Management Plan, that's super relevant. There's other source protection plans, including Immigration Creek and Rose Creek watershed plans that are expected in this next year. And then we also try to evaluate total maximum daily load recommendations, and there's a bunch of those out there. Probably the most relevant is the E. coli TMDLs that are rolling out. They've been changing each year with good information coming out. Not all of them are totally finished yet. We still have some in progress, but we try to incorporate those into our planning efforts. This is where Lily's going to jump in.
So Bob kind of set the stage well. So the Salt Lake County Watershed Plan follows the EPA's 9-element watershed-based plan framework, which is a comprehensive strategy developed to address pollution and improve water quality. So these plans typically have a detailed assessment of water quality, pollutant sources that are causing water quality issues, and then recommended management practices to improve water quality. Like the name implies, there are 9 elements, 9 minimum elements for a watershed plan to be classified as an EPA 9-element plan. So the EPA has developed this really nice guidebook. It's a nice light read, probably a couple hundred pages long if you're interested. But it has a 6-step process for developing these watershed plans, and the EPA 9 elements kind of fall within these 6-step process. So the first step, building partnerships. So that's all of you in the room. Anyone who works, lives, and lives in Salt Lake County is really important to the development of these plans. They have on-the-ground knowledge of issues in the watershed and can really help guide the planning process. Next, we want to characterize the watershed. So this is kind of setting the stage for the planning area. So what are the issues? What are the key concerns? We inventory data during this phase. We analyze that data and we identify data gaps. The first element is actually captured in this watershed characterization. So it's identifying the causes and sources of pollution. The next step is setting goals and identifying solutions. So we're kind of setting the overarching goals for the watershed plan. Kind of what do we want to accomplish? We address elements B and C, which is determining load reductions needed. We use the TMDLs already developed to do this. And then we describe management measures or implementation activities and the targeted critical areas for those. The next phase of the planning process is designing the implementation plan. This is really the heart of the plan. It kind of tells Salt Lake County and partners what they're going to be doing over the next 10-year planning cycle. And this addresses elements D through I, so that's the remaining 9 elements to be eligible for a 9-element plan. And so this implementation plan tries to describe the technical and financial assistance needed for each of the implementation activities. They develop an information and education component. Again, this symposium is a great example of how Salt Lake County does that. We develop a detailed project schedule so we can track the implementation activities. We set measurable milestones. So we kind of classify the implementation projects as short-term. Can they happen in the next 1 to 2 years? Midterm, can they happen in 3 to 5? Or long-term, so 5+ years? We also develop indicators to measure progress. So that can be, meeting a certain load reduction or X number of BMPs in a certain area. And then we also develop a monitoring component. Salt Lake County has a pretty robust monitoring plan already, but we did identify a few data gaps in this analysis, so those will be added. After the plan has been developed, it's time to implement the plan. So Salt Lake County and partners over the next 10 years will be following through with that implementation plan and implementing all of those different projects. We are currently in the final stages of drafting the plan, so we'll have that published by end of 2025, and implementation will start in 2026. As the plan is being implemented, Salt Lake County will measure progress. So they'll track which implementation projects are being completed and then make adjustments as needed as things change and adjust. Not part of the 6 steps, but important to note is these plans are meant to be iterative and adaptive. So they're not set in stone like Bob mentioned. So this is on a 10-year planning cycle. So Salt Lake County will come back to this plan and update it. We have 6 overarching watershed goals that we have for this plan. Again, these EPA 9-element plans are really focused on water quality. So our first goal is to reduce pollution and meet water quality standards. Our second goal is, again, having stakeholder and public education. So Salt Lake County will continue hosting events like this and doing other stakeholder and public education events to share problems, solutions, and resources. Affordable strategies, so all of the implementation projects, we want them to be cost effective and actually make an impact. And we have a focus on habitat and sediment management, so we want to ensure that banks and stream banks stay stable and that we're protecting our water resources and wetlands. In-stream flows and flood balance are important. Water quantity is very closely tied to water quality, so we want to support those in-stream flows with our projects. And then finally, we want this plan to qualify for 319 funding. And to do that, we need to meet all 9 elements. So we want the plan to be assessment and funding ready. Like Bob mentioned, a huge component of this watershed, starting this watershed plan is involving stakeholders. We had over 60 stakeholders involved in this plan from state and federal agencies, cities and municipalities, and nonprofits. We hosted numerous workshops throughout the planning process to solicit feedback. We had our Partners help us refine our plan goals, which I just discussed on the last slide. We had our partners help with key concerns, stressors, and sources of pollution in the watershed. And then really importantly, we had them outline some of the implementation activities that they wanted to lead or partner with for this plan. One of the ways we solicited input from our partners is we developed this GIS tool where partners could input proposed project ideas within Salt Lake County and have a spatial attribution to that. And then again, water quality is a big focus of these plans, and Salt Lake County has quite a few water quality issues. If you look at this map, and sorry, this side of the room, I'm ignoring you. This is the assessment status from the latest integrated report that the Division of Water Quality publishes every 2 years. Anything in green means we're doing pretty good. Water quality is good. We're meeting our beneficial uses. Anything in red means it's impaired for one or more of these parameters. These are a lot of parameters. We don't have time to go over them all today, so we'll just be concentrating on a few. But maybe just a tidbit, read our plan and you can read all the fun data analysis that we did. Outside of water quality concerns, we also have additional stakeholder concerns that we wanted to include in our plan. One was stream stability. As you all know, Salt Lake County is a very urban county. There's lots of urbanization and development that can affect stream stability and cause increased erosion, which in turn leads to more water quality issues. Salt Lake County does a really great assessment of stream stability, and so some of this data will be really critical for choosing areas to do some of the implementation activities. Hydromodification is also a big concern. There's lots of canals and diversions across the county. Again, water quality, very closely related to water quantity. I don't know if any of you guys recognize what this is. It's a surplus canal, but it diverts over 50% of the water from the Jordan River. Another big issue, nice lovely picture, is trash and debris in our waterways. Again, live in a very urban environment, and direct input or from stormwater creates accumulation of storm trash, particularly in the Jordan River since all the tributaries feed that. So we have all these water quality concerns. In the plan, we tie them to pollutant sources. So where are these impairments actually coming from? We typically bucket pollutant sources into 3 different tiers. First being non-point source pollution, which is runoff from urban or agricultural landscapes. You don't actually know exactly where it's coming from. Point sources, think of more of like an end of pipe entering into a waterway. And that can be from municipal and industrial stormwater, wastewater, and then also stormwater MS4s. And then natural occurring. Lots of these impairments do have a healthy background level. So all of these sources together affect what kind of water quality we're getting. I'm going to switch over here. It's really hard going back and forth. So E. coli is a pretty big issue in Salt Lake County. Division of Water Quality has developed an E. coli TMDL. Everything in red is impaired for E. coli within Salt Lake County. Lots of the common sources for E. coli are failing septic systems, grazed pastures, wildlife, pet waste, human waste, lots of fun, gross stuff. In our analysis, we looked at 10 years worth of data for E. coli. And this is looking at recreation season versus non-recreation season. In our analysis, there is quite a bit higher concentrations observed during the recreation season. I think 90% of our sites were higher. We also looked at different hydrologic conditions. So when the samples were they taken during base flow, spring runoff, or storm? And there were higher exceedances of the water quality criteria during storm. So a lot of this E. coli is getting flushed from urban environment into the stream. So what are we going to do about it? That's where we have some of our implementation activities. Again, these are outlined a lot more. in our plan, but some BMPs are restroom facilities, pet waste stations, riparian fencing, low impact development, that's a stormwater BMP, wildlife feeding signs in high congregation areas, septic improvements and replacements. Priority areas is really countywide, as you saw from that map, and we have lots of key partners. Total phosphorus, we also did the same analysis where we looked at base below, spring runoff, and storm runoff, and found that there was quite a few exceedances across all of these different conditions. Total phosphorus is a parameter of concern because excess of that can cause increased algae, which can lead to harmful algal blooms, which is toxic to humans and animals. Some BMPs we outlined for that, similar to E. coli. Lots of these BMPs can target more than one parameter. And then priority areas are the Jordan River and headwaters and similar key partners.
Just going to talk briefly on dissolved oxygen, organic matter, and temperature. So as we looked at dissolved oxygen levels, we know that as temperature increases, its ability to hold oxygen decreases. So that leads to lower dissolved oxygen levels. Also, as organic matter is present in the Jordan River, microorganisms consume that, process that uses oxygen, therefore also decreasing dissolved oxygen levels. The figure on the right shows where we're seeing impaired assessment units in Salt Lake County. You can see that most of the exceedances are on the lower Jordan River, downstream of the surplus canal. That's where we're seeing a lot of the flows decrease. Some of that organic matter can settle out. And then the figure on the left shows kind of the relationship between temperature and dissolved oxygen, noting that most of the exceedances that we're seeing, and these are for the sites in the lower Jordan River, are during the summer months when temperatures are high. The 2013 dissolved oxygen TMDL determined that organic matter was the primary pollutant that was leading to these lower dissolved oxygen levels in the Jordan River, and attributed that to sources mainly coming from Utah Lake, wastewater treatment facilities, tributaries, runoff, and irrigation return flow. Since then, there's been numerous studies on the relationship between organic matter and dissolved oxygen in the Jordan River, and that's detailed more specifically in our plan if you're interested. These are some of the BMPs that are outlined for this issue, with the priority areas being in that lower Jordan River area, as well as the lower reaches of the tributaries, where maybe we're seeing some of the contributions, leaf litter, some of the organic matter from those tributaries. Lily and Bob have talked about the implementation plan already in some detail. I'll go into it a little bit further. So after assessing watershed conditions and diving into all of that data, the next step is to identify and evaluate management measures. The goal for this plan is to be a tool that people can use, Salt Lake County can use, to make improvements. So this covers 7 of the 9 elements. They're listed here, includes things like outlining management measures, looking at financial resources, schedules, milestones, etc. So in the implementation plan that's in the full plan, we've identified a number of different types of implementation activities: structural, non-structural, planning, and information and outreach. And grouping these in this way just helps track different projects. This is really small text that you probably can't see that well, but this is just a screen grab of the actual implementation plan. Each activity has its own row, and we've outlined really specific information for each activity, again, because we want this plan to be a roadmap and be clearly outlined. So the columns, we include things like what pollutant source is it going to address? Where is the priority location for an implementation activity? What's the estimated schedule? Specific indicators to measure success. Like Bob mentioned, like this plan is iterative and adaptive, So we've outlined, what can be looked at, what can be measured to assess the success of each activity. We've done a high-level estimation of costs for some of these so that as activities are planned for, Salt Lake County and partners can understand generally how much something might cost. We've outlined potential funding sources. There's some codes kind of in the second to the right column. In the plan, there's a full table that lists out a number of different potential funding sources. This plan is, the purpose is to get 319 funding. However, there's a lot of other funding sources that can be drawn on as well. And then some expected results. We have a monitoring plan that's outlined in the final plan as part of the implementation plan. A lot of plans in one. The 4 key areas are focused on our water quality, hydrology, habitat, and social recreation. So some of the key activities are outlined here. There's a number in the plan. Like Lily mentioned, Salt Lake County does a really great job of monitoring already. So what's been outlined here is just to fill in some of the key gaps that were identified as part of the watershed characterization of this. I'm gonna hand it back to Bob for just a moment to talk about where they've been since the last plan and completing some of these implementation activities. And then I'll jump back up to say where we're headed.
Okay, we've tried a lot of things. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we've tried large-scale restoration projects on the Jordan River. We've tried small-scale restoration projects on tributaries. We've tried education outreach. We've presented at community festivals. We host this symposium. We've tried lots of different things. And we feel like we've gotten a lot of bang for our buck from some of it and maybe not as much bang for our buck from other projects. So we try to take that into consideration with the implementation strategies that we're coming up with the new plan. So we've reached out to project partners because one of the things we found to have the most bang for the buck is when you have an invested partner, somebody with skin in the game who wants to help with a project. That's going to take a project further than if you have a really well-defined project but maybe not a willing partner. It's never going to work as well. So involving other groups that are interested in common goals, that's kind of one of the key takeaways we've learned. I guess, the public education outreach, we've actually scaled back in the last few years on how many community festivals, how many tabling events that we've attended, because we weren't sure if we were getting our bang for our buck. We've partnered with the Stormwater Coalition to use some of the data from their public information. They do the survey with a lot of respondents. And the data indicates that we've maybe not done the best job with our public education and outreach. So I think that's an area that we need to reinvest our efforts and find new ways to get information out. And as Nalini said this morning, it's not always to the public that attends this event. We need to find a way to get our message out to the public that doesn't attend this event, the public that is probably working right now or has other jobs or has other interests. We need to find a way to get the messaging out to those diverse groups if we really want to have success in solving our water quality, our water quantity, and prioritizing things differently in the future. So that's kind of a big takeaway from the Stormwater Coalition's report. But we will continue to do the other outreach events. We will continue to perform restoration and stabilization projects. And I guess the takeaway from this is, even though this plan is mostly done, if you didn't have a chance to submit anything in the planning process, or if there's a project that you are interested in and you'd like to partner with us, please reach out. We can always include that in our implementation plan. It may not be printed in the plan, but we're always looking for project partners, and specifically project partners that are interested in seeing a difference in water quantity, water quality, or the aspects that we talked about in this presentation. Social, recreational, really difficult to quantify, but we're interested in those projects. If you can increase water availability, that's huge, and that's oftentimes a water rights issue. And then water quality projects, those ones we've been specializing in for a long time.
So I'll just briefly go over kind of where we're headed and the short-term, midterm, long-term activities that are some of those that are outlined. We've grouped the implementation activities by short-term, which is 1 to 2 years, midterm, which is 2 to 5 years, and long-term, which is 5 to 10 years. There are some short-term projects that inform some of the midterm and long-term projects. So you can see Some of the short-term ones here include outreach events, as well as identifying priority areas for some of the BMPs that are suggested, identifying areas that maybe are lacking pet waste stations, and pet waste stations may be a midterm goal. Some of the midterm goals are ones that are just going to take a little bit longer to put together, so BMPs, partnering with other organizations for public restrooms along the Jordan River, and then long-term projects, again, that are going to need more funding, more planning, more coordination, like conservation easements or park retrofitting. I think we've talked about next steps already. The plan is currently in final comment period from stakeholders and partners that have been involved throughout the process. And then, like Lily mentioned early on, the next 10 years will be hitting the ground running, implementing these projects, monitoring success, tracking activities, and adjusting as needed. As Salt Lake County evaluates activities, there might be a short-term project that gets moved to a midterm, or maybe there's a midterm project where funding becomes available and they can do it sooner. So it's all about tracking and making it fit the needs of Salt Lake County for the next 10 years. That's all we have. I don't know if we have time for questions.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. Question I have is, do you reach out to other states or do you research different ways to do things? I see a lot of in-state input, but do you reach out? For instance, I know like Kansas City has a combined sewer system and they're polluting like the entire Mississippi River. They have to, region, and they have to have a 20-year plan with the EPA to mitigate that with the ultimate goal of separating them, but they've got a lot of things in common with pollutants that you guys have. So I'm just wondering if you get ideas from other places, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. As we're developing the implementation plan, we're looking at what's been successful in other states. We've worked on plans in other states as well. So we're taking those ideas and saying what makes sense for Utah, what's feasible and practical here, but certainly looking at successes from other places as well and drawing upon those.
You guys always do such a great job on this program. I keep trying to escape, but I always get lulled back into giving a talk. But one thing I'd like you guys to know is that the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council has funded lots and lots and lots of scientific research on the Jordan River. And Theron and I put together a compendium of about 900 pages of scientific research on the Jordan River. And I don't think you folks ever got a hold of that. And it'd be nice to send that to you guys, because there's a lot of useful information in there.
Yeah, I know Lily and I are familiar with a lot of the research, and if you look at the plan, we've compiled a lot of different sources that inform kind of the information that's included in there.
I'm curious, the 2034 Olympics are within this 10-year horizon. I'm curious if that informed any of the plan, was included at all.
Not explicitly in terms of how the goals changed based on that. I think Olympics or not, the goal is to benefit the water quality and the habitat conditions within Salt Lake County. I don't know, Bob, if you want to say anything else to that.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to jump in on that one too. So there are some really big events coming in the future, the Olympics being one of them. Another event that may or may not happen, but it's forecast in 2034, Kennecott Rio Tinto Copperers, their permit to continue mining operations ends in 2034. And that could turn the largest mining operation in North America into the largest land development organization in North America. So that's why we're really jumping hard into the policy side of things, because the long-term effects of both of those things are going to be governed by our planning zoning decisions. So we've really thrown our weight into that, and hopefully it's not too late.
Well, if that's all. Ari, Lily, Bob, thank you very much.